The tea had cooled by the time I noticed it. I had brewed it for her, cinnamon, her favorite since she was little. I used to make it with honey when she was sick. Now I made it out of habit, even though she rarely drank it. I wrapped my hands around the mug to keep them steady, but it didn't help. They trembled, not from age, but from something deeper, something that settled in the pit of my stomach and climbed into my chest. The chipped edge of the mug pressed into my palm. It used to be her favorite. We both laughed once when she dropped it, and it cracked. "Let's keep it anyway," she said. "It's still good." Funny how cracks never bothered her before, but now everything felt split. The steam drifted up gently, then vanished, just like the closeness we once had. I tried to focus on it, to stay grounded, to hold on to anything that felt real, but the words kept replaying in my mind, louder than any shout. A burden. That's what she called me. Not directly, not in anger, but quietly. As if I had turned into something she had to carry, something she resented carrying. My chest felt tight, my eyes burned, but I wouldn't cry. Not yet. I kept sipping even though I couldn't taste anything. My mouth was dry, my throat thick, but I kept pretending. It was just tea, not disappointed, not grief. I stared down at the mug in my lap, my fingers curled around it tighter, trying to keep it from shaking. I wondered when it got so heavy. Or maybe it wasn't the mug. Maybe it was just everything else. She was in this sigh. Next room, talking on the phone like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't heard her, but I had. Every word, every syllable. And still, I sat there, rocking gently, holding the mug like it could warm something inside me that had already gone cold. She didn't say it cruelly. That almost would have been easier. It was soft. So soft that I nearly missed it, if it weren't for how loud it landed inside me. She didn't even look at me when she said it. She's just a burden now. She was rinsing a plate. The faucet is running. The soft clink of her spoon tapping the ceramic. The hum of the fridge behind us. All these little sounds, and yet, everything in me went silent. I had been talking, just sharing a story like I always did. About Harold's old radio, how he used to sing along with scratchy Sinatra records on Sunday mornings. She barely nodded. Then she turned to her phone, tapped the screen, smiled at something, laughed, and said it. I remember looking at my hands, resting on my lap. I hadn't realized they'd gone still. My breath had too. I sat there, in that little kitchen I never quite made mine, and felt smaller than I'd felt in years. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse me. She just said it like it was a fact. She'd come to accept, something she was now brave enough to say aloud. I didn't respond. I don't know if I could have. My tongue felt thick. My throat is dry. I just listened to the rest of her conversation fade in and out, like a song you don't want to hear anymore but can't turn off. When she left the room, I stared at the sink for a long time, watched a small soap bubble float up, shimmer, then disappear. And I remember thinking, that's what it feels like, to be gently erased. She didn't come back, not for a while, and I didn't move. I sat there with her words still hanging in the room like dust in a sunbeam. I wish she had yelled. I wish she had looked me in the eye. I wish I had said something, anything, to make her take it back. But instead, I sat in that kitchen, listening. To the silence after her voice, wondering how long I had been a burden before she finally said it out loud. I looked at the checkbook lying open on the table. My handwriting hadn't changed much over the years, still a little slanted, still curling the Y in my last name. I had written her name in the memo line with care. Mortgage, just that word. No note, no heart. I didn't want to seem sentimental, but I was. Every number on that line carried a memory. Missed dinners to pick up double shifts. Worn soles on shoes I wore longer than I should have. Grocery lists with lines crossed out, not from having bought them, but from choosing not to. That Money came from places she'd never seen. I watched her glance at the check earlier, just a glance. Then back to her phone. No pause. No thank you. Not even a joke. The sunlight hit the table hard now, too bright. It made the ink look sharper than it was. I pressed my fingers against the edge of the paper, wondering if she would ever understand what I was really offering. I wasn't just paying off her bills. I was asking, quietly, desperately, to still be of use, to still matter. The check sat there like a bridge I built with trembling hands, but she hadn't crossed it. She hadn't even looked. The wall clock ticked. The room felt stale. I stared at the numbers, realizing they didn't mean what I thought they did. Love can't be measured in zeros. But rejection, that sometimes can. I folded the check in half, just slightly, like I was tucking something away. I didn't tear it, not yet. I just wanted her to say, "You didn't have to do that," or "Thank you," or even, "I see you." But she said nothing, and so the check stayed, between us, unspent, unnoticed, like so much else. I pulled the chair back from the table and sat down slowly, the way I always did, using both hands, steadying my knees. The cushion was a little lopsided, worn from use. I had made it years ago, back when she was little, using old curtains and cotton batting. She used to sit in this chair while I braided her hair before school. Her little legs never touched the floor, always swinging, always moving. She would hum nonsense songs, twisting my necklace between her fingers. Sometimes she'd giggle and ask why my hands had so many lines. I used to say, "Each one is from loving you. That chair used to be hers." Now it was mine again. But it didn't feel the same. The kitchen was quiet, still smelled faintly of burnt toast and something floral, maybe the air freshener she used. Or maybe the flowers on the windowsill bent a little under their own weight. Even they looked tired. I held my tea in both hands and stared at the mug. The steam was gone. The cinnamon scent had faded. I hadn't taken a sip in a while. I looked at the spot across from me where she used to sit. She told me about school, dances, college roommates, and her first job offer. That chair was empty now, and so was something inside me. I didn't cry. I just sat, letting the memory of her small feet brush my shins, even though they weren't there. Sometimes love stays. In furniture, in the way a cushion dips, in the chipped edge of a mug, in the quiet, and sometimes it leaves before the room even knows it's gone. I turned my hands over in my lap, palms up. The skin was soft now, looser than it used to be, but still strong. I looked at the lines that traced across them, some from time, some from use. These hands had wiped away her tears, buttoned up her coat, held her fevered forehead, and clapped the loudest at her graduation. They'd cooked, sewn, carried, and, in quiet moments, they prayed for her too. I used to believe love lived in the hands. That memory did too. I thought, surely she'd remember the hands that raised her, but she didn't, or maybe she did, and it no longer mattered. I pressed my thumb to the edge of the table, grounding myself. A lawnmower buzzed faintly outside. The curtains lifted, with a gentle breeze. Somewhere, someone was living a life that still made room for mothers. I rubbed a spot on my wrist where she once tied a bracelet made from yarn. Pink and fraying, I wore it for weeks. I wonder if she remembers that. I wonder when I stopped being comfortable. When I became background, I pressed my hands together, like in prayer, not for something miraculous, just for strength. To still believe I mattered, even when I wasn't seen, to still love, even when it was quiet. She walked out of the room, but her words stayed behind. They curled into the corners of the kitchen, slipped under the cabinet doors, and settled into the silence. The kettle hissed once, just once, then quieted. No whistle, just steam and stillness. I sat at the table, hands folded, spine straight. My breath felt shallow, like I didn't want to disturb the air, like moving too quickly would shatter something already cracked. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked. A fly buzzed against the window for a second, then gave up. She was gone, but her words echoed. She's just a burden. Not yelled, not argued, just said. I looked at the tea again. Cold now, abandoned, and I felt the same. Grief doesn't always wear black. It doesn't always come with casseroles and condolence cards. Sometimes it comes in a sentence, in the kitchen, on a Tuesday, and sometimes it wears the face of your child. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just listened to the silence, because some things are too heavy for sound. The sun warmed the back of my neck as I moved slowly between the fruit stalls. I always came early, before the best berries were gone. The air smelled like summer, sweet and bright, with a hint of fresh dirt beneath it all. Peaches, strawberries, plums, everything ripe, everything waiting. I reached for a carton of strawberries, turned one over in my hand. It was perfect, red and heart-shaped, like something from a child's drawing. I smiled to myself. In my mind, I saw her, tiny, giggling, sticky fingers reaching for the fruit, her cheeks pink from the sun. She didn't exist yet, not really, but she was real to me. Back then, I used to walk through the market and imagine the kind of mother I'd be. The kind who packed lunches with notes, who remembered which fruit bruised the easiest, who hummed songs while folding laundry. I'd pick fruit like I was feeding a future I hadn't met yet. This one's for her, I whispered once, choosing the ripest peach. The vendor looked at me sideways. I just smiled. Every fruit I picked felt like a promise, a slice of joy waiting to happen. I carried the bag close to my chest, like I was protecting something sacred. She was still years away, but I could already hear her laugh, already feel the weight of her head on my shoulder after too much excitement. I walked home slowly, the bag swinging gently at my side. The sun beat down on the sidewalk, and I remember thinking, one day she'll taste this. One day she'll laugh just like I imagine, and when that day came, she did. Juice on her chin, curls bouncing, giggling like she'd been part of those mornings all along. Maybe she had been. Maybe she always had. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I moved through the dark hallway, arms full of her. She was so small then, barely more than a breath wrapped in cotton. Her head rested in the crook of my arm, warm and damp from her bath. She smelled like baby lotion and powder, like innocence and trust. The nursery was quiet, lit only by the soft lamp by the rocker. I eased into the seat and let it sway beneath us. The chair groaned gently. The way Harold always said it sounded like an old man stretching his back. I smiled at the thought, then looked down at her. She was watching me. Her wide eyes were heavy with sleep, but still fixed on my face like she was trying to memorize it. Her tiny fingers clung to the edge of my sleeve. Not tightly, just enough to say, "Don't go." So I stayed. I began to hum. Nothing specific, just the same lullabies my own mother sang to me. Half remembered, half made up. I swayed with the rhythm, letting the sound of my voice fill the quiet. Her eyelids fluttered. Her breathing slowed. I could feel it against my chest, soft even. Mine was still uneven, still catching on the edges of wonder. I had waited so long for this moment, for this quiet, for her. I pressed my lips gently to her forehead, breathing her in. Her skin was warm, her little body curled against mine like she was born knowing exactly where she belonged. "I love you," I whispered. It came out like a prayer, like something sacred, not just because she was mine, but because she was here, real, breathing, alive in my arms. I stayed like that for a long time, long after her eyes had closed. The house was silent, except for the creak of the rocker and the soft sighs from her lips. I didn't want to move. I didn't want the night to end. She was everything, and at that moment, I was too. The sewing machine hummed in steady rhythm, the needle moving in and out of the fabric like a heartbeat. My hands knew the work without, looking, tugging, smoothing, guiding. The light above the table was yellow and soft, casting long shadows on the kitchen wall. Rain tapped against the windows, and somewhere in the other room Harold snored gently. I reached for a strip of fabric, lavender, her favorite, and lined it against the edge of the dress. The collar was frayed, but I could patch it. I always could. She'd outgrown the hem again, and I smiled at the thought. Every time I finished one dress, she grew just enough to need another. Her initials, EL, went into the inside tag. Always. Not because anyone would see them, but because I needed her to know this wasn't just a dress. It was a love letter. We Kauai didn't have much. I had stopped buying coffee for myself months ago, started cutting old pillowcases to make drawstring bags for her lunches. Every stitch, every seam, I did it so she'd never feel the want I had felt growing up. The clock ticked past midnight. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes. My stomach grumbled, but I ignored it. I had enough scraps left to start her prom dress next week. She'd shown me the one in the store window, blue like the summer sky. I couldn't buy that one, but I could. Make something close. I leaned forward and fed the next line of stitches through, careful not to let the needle catch. The rain grew heavier, and I felt it in my bones. But I kept going, because when she wore these things, she smiled. And when she smiled, I didn't feel tired anymore. I didn't feel hungry. I felt like I'd done something good. The house was dim, the porch light flickering through the blinds. I had just finished wiping down the counter when I realized I hadn't heard Harold's laugh in a while. The kind of realization that doesn't hit all at once, but drips in like cold water down. "You're back, Harold?" I called. My voice was steady, but my hand tightened around the dish towel. No answer. I crossed the living room slowly. He was in his chair, head tilted just slightly, not dramatically, just enough to be wrong. The air felt thick, like the room was holding its breath with me. "Harold?" I said again, softer now. I reached out and touched his shoulder. His skin was still warm. His face was calm. But there was no breath, no rise, no sound. The weight of that silence wrapped around me like a coat I didn't ask for. I dropped the towel. My knees gave out a little, and I sat on the floor beside him. I didn't cry right away. I just stared. The porch light flickered once. Then again. I remember thinking, he always changed that bulb. He always said it was a stubborn thing. I rested my hand on his, still, heavy, familiar. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. But I couldn't fall apart. Not then. I had a daughter sleeping down the hall. I had to be the steady one. So I whispered, "I've got her now." And I pressed my grief into the quiet, into the corners of that room, and I held on. She stood in the doorway, hands in her sweatshirt pocket. I was stitching a tear in her jeans, right at the knee, where she always knelt to tie her shoes. The sunlight came through the blinds in golden stripes, falling across the denim in my lap. I didn't look up right away. I was threading the needle. Just right, steady hands, focused breath. "Hey," she said. I glanced up. "Mend it again," I smiled. "You're hard on your knees." She gave a tiny laugh, then paused. "I know," she said. There was a quiet that followed, the kind that usually came before her asking for a ride or for me to back off about homework, but instead, I heard it. Barely louder than a breath. "Love you." My hand froze. The needle hung in the air like a held note. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and walked away, her steps quick and awkward. No hug, no look back, but she said it first. For once, I didn't have to prompt it. I looked down at the jeans in my lap. I ran my fingers along the new stitch. I folded them neatly and placed them beside me, my chest so full it ached. I didn't say it out loud, but I whispered it inside myself. I love you too, baby. I always have. The rows of chairs stretched in every direction, filled with proud parents and camera flashes. The air buzzed with whispers and shuffling feet. I sat near the back, hands folded in my lap, heart pounding behind my ribs like a drum. Then I saw her cap gown, that tassel bouncing as she walked across the stage. She didn't see me, not from where I sat, but I saw her. She looked straight ahead, confident and radiant. Her eyes lit up like she was chasing something only she could see. When they called her name, I stood up. I didn't care if anyone else did. I clapped, hard. My palms stung, but I kept going. I clapped like I could carry her across that stage with my love alone. My cheeks were wet before I even noticed. I thought of the bags I'd sewn out of curtains, the cookies I mailed wrapped in paper towels, the late nights spent pacing and praying. All of it had led here. She reached the other side of the stage and paused. Just for a second. Her head turned slightly. Did she see me? I don't know. But I stood a little straighter. I clapped until my hands burned. Because this wasn't just her moment. It was mine, too. The phone used to ring twice, and she'd answer with a cheerful, "Hi, Mama." I used to hear her smile before. She even spoke a word. But lately the pauses have grown. The rings stretched longer. Sometimes it went to voicemail. When she did answer, her voice carried something distant. "Hey, Mom. Not cold, not angry, just busy, always busy. How was your day, sweetheart?" I'd ask. "Oh, fine. Just work stuff. I've got a lot going on." I tried to keep my voice light, telling her about the neighbor's cat getting stuck in my azaleas again, or how I finally figured out the humming in the fridge. She used to laugh at those stories, but now I'd hear a pause. Then, the silence. After that stretched. Sometimes I'd fill it, sometimes I let it hang. "You okay?" she'd ask, usually right before saying she had to go. "I'm good." I'd lie. I remember sitting in my chair by the window, the one where I could see the driveway and the mailman's slow steps. The clock on the wall ticked louder with each pause in our conversation. The smell of old coffee lingered from the morning, mixing with the lemon polish I'd used on the side table. I'd press the phone to my ear, holding it a moment after she said goodbye. "I love you," I'd whisper, even if she'd already hung up. Then I'd set the receiver down gently, always gently, as if that might bring her back. The room felt quieter after every call, like the silence settled deeper into the walls. I didn't blame her, not really. Life gets fast, but the ache of fading was real, and I wished just once that the phone would ring before I picked it up. She showed up just after 5. A knock on the door, short and quick, like she was already halfway to leaving. I opened it and smiled big, like I'd been waiting all day, which I had. "Happy birthday, Mom," she said, holding out a cake in a plastic dome. The lid was fogged from the cold, and the sticker was still on. Vanilla with colored sprinkles, the kind you grab on the way out of the grocery store. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, stepping aside to let her in. She gave me a quick hug, polite, rushed. Her phone buzzed in her back pocket, and she reached for it before setting the cake down on the dining table. "No candles?" I joked, trying to keep it light. "Oh, I forgot," she said, not looking up. "Do you even want to light candles?" I chuckled softly. "No, it's okay. I just like having you here." She nodded, already scrolling. The room smelled faintly of that store-bought vanilla. It wasn't the same as the buttercream I used to make from scratch, but I smiled anyway. Because that's what mothers do. "Want some tea?" I asked. "Actually, I've got to run soon," she mumbled. "Just wanted to drop this off." She sat for a few minutes, told me a little about her job, and laughed once at something on her phone. I sat across from her, watching the sun dip through the window blinds, casting stripes of gold across the table. I remembered birthdays when she was younger, her hands covered in flour helping me bake, her laughter echoing through the kitchen, her joy so big it filled the house. Now, the only thing on the table was the cake and a receipt tucked under the dome. She stood. "I'll text you later, okay?" I nodded and walked her to the door. "I love you," I said. "You too," she said over her shoulder, stepping. Off the porch. When the door clicked shut, I turned back to the cake. The room felt too quiet. I placed it on a plate, took a bite. It was sweet, but the moment wasn't. The coffee had just finished brewing. That familiar gurgle followed by the soft hiss of steam was comforting in a way not much else was these days. I poured a mug, added a splash of cream, and stood near the screen door, letting the morning air drift in. That's when I heard her laugh. It came from the porch, soft and light, like a wind chime on a breezy day. She was on the phone, chatting. With someone. I didn't mean to listen, but the door was open and her voice carried. She just talks too much, she said with a chuckle. It's like she needs me to hear every detail of her day. I can't handle it sometimes. I stopped stirring. Her voice wasn't angry. It wasn't cruel. It was casual, easy even, like she was describing a stranger on the bus. Not me, her mother. She means well, I guess, she added. But it's exhausting. Then more laughter, softer this time, almost embarrassed. I stood in the kitchen, mug in hand, the scent of coffee swirling around me, and felt my face grow hot. Not from anger, from something deeper, from shame. I turned away from the door and set the mug down. My hands trembled slightly, and I pressed them flat against the counter to steady myself. I didn't cry. I didn't walk out. I didn't say her name. I just stood there, remembering all the stories I used to tell her, about her first word, her favorite dress, how she used to hide pennies in her shoes. She used to love those stories. She used to ask for more. Now, they were too much. I glanced at the coffee mug, still steaming, untouched. Outside, she kept talking. Inside, something in me went quiet. Some words don't need to be shouted to break. They just need to be true. The suitcase sat open on the bed, and I stood staring at it longer than I packed. I wasn't just folding clothes. I was folding up a life. Every sweater I placed inside held a memory. Every pair of socks felt like another small goodbye. After the fall, the doctor said I shouldn't live alone anymore. "You were lucky," he said. "Next time, you might not be." My daughter offered, of course. "Just for a little while, Mom," she'd said, smiling like it would be easy. So here I was, packing, quietly. I lifted Harold's robe from the hook on the back of the closet door. It still smelled faintly like him, shaving cream and cedar. I pressed it to my face for a moment, eyes closed, then folded it gently and laid it on top of my nightgowns. In the bottom drawer, I found the embroidered photo frame she'd made in second grade. Glitter glue barely holding on. I wrapped it in tissue and tucked it in a side pocket. The room was still, dust floating in the late morning light. I could hear a lawn mower down the street, the hum distant and steady. A lavender sachet tumbled. From the drawer as I closed it, I caught it and slipped it into my purse. Something familiar to bring along. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my fingers over the quilt I'd made years ago, now too faded to match anything in her guest room. I wasn't just leaving my house. I was leaving the way it felt to belong. Somewhere. I zipped the suitcase and stood. The wheels bumped along the hardwood as I rolled it to the door. Before I turned off the light, I looked back once more. Not because I forgot anything, but because I needed a second to remember what I was. Giving up. The guest room smelled new. Too new. The kind of clean that didn't feel lived in. Lavender-scented detergent, unopened boxes stacked in the corner, plastic wrapping still half-peeled from the pillows. I set my suitcase near the dresser and sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was firm, untouched. My old quilt, faded and soft from years of use, looked out of place against the crisp white sheets. I smoothed it out anyway. My rocking chair hadn't made the trip. "No room," she'd said. I didn't argue. The siu. Room was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't welcome you, just waits. I stood and opened a drawer, placed a few folded towels inside. The scent of fabric softener wafted up, strong and unfamiliar. I tried humming, just softly, to fill the space. A hymn I used to sing when she was little. But even my voice felt like too much in this room. So I stopped. I looked out the small window. The sun barely made it through the blinds, casting thin lines of light across the floor. Everything here was hers, her rules, her rhythms. I was just visiting, even if no one said it out loud. I sat again, hands in my lap, feeling smaller than I had in years. The house didn't know me, and I wasn't sure if it ever would. She was all ready, seated at the kitchen counter, scrolling through her phone with one hand and sipping coffee with the other. The sunlight spilled in through the windows, soft but sharp, catching on the rim of her cup. I walked in quietly and stood beside her. My hands trembled just a little, but I steadied them with purpose. "I wrote a check," I said gently, placing it beside her mug, "for the mortgage." She didn't look up, just nodded faintly and kept scrolling. My name was there in cursive, hers too. The line of numbers is carefully written. Every digit carried something with it: old dinners skipped, extra shifts, birthday, gifts not bought. Sacrifices, really. But love, too. She didn't touch it. "I know you didn't ask," I said, trying to sound calm. "But I wanted to help." Still nothing. Then, without warning, she said it. "You're just a burden now." She didn't say it cruelly, just plainly. Like she'd finally let out something she'd been holding back. My body didn't move, but inside, something cracked. I stared at the check. I didn't pull it back. I didn't speak. I nudged it closer to her, not out of guilt, but out of hope. Maybe it would mean something. Maybe it would remind her who I'd been. She picked up her mug, took another sip, and stood. "I've got a call," she said, walking out of the room. I watched her go. Then I looked at the check, still sitting there. Not payment, just proof. And even that, she never saw. The street lamp outside blinked again, like it was trying to stay awake. I sat by. The small upstairs window, wrapped in the quilt I brought from home. It didn't quite fit the guest chair, but it held the smell of my linen drawer, and that was enough to make it feel like mine. Everything looked still from up here. The parked cars, the sleeping houses, the sidewalks no one walked at this hour. Just the faint hum of traffic far off and the occasional whisper of wind against the siding. I missed my own window. The one over the sink, where steam from the kettle would cloud the glass every morning. I missed knowing which drawer held the measuring spoons without having to think. I missed the floorboard near the bedroom that groaned every night like it, was tucking me in. Mostly, though, I missed being someone's reason to smile. I held my breath for a moment just to hear what silence sounded like in this house. It was different. It didn't breathe with me the way mine used to. It just waited, cold and still. I sometimes imagined Harold sitting in the corner chair, humming Sinatra under his breath, holding his crossword and raising one eyebrow when he needed a hint. I'd answer without looking up from my knitting. We didn't always talk, but we always heard each other. Now the only sound was the street lamp's flicker and the clock ticking too fast. I pressed my fingers against the glass, watching the faint orange glow stretch over the curb like a tired hand. Some nights, I whispered my daughter's name just to see if the dark would answer back. It never did, but still, I whispered. The kitchen light was already on when I stepped in. Cold tile met my feet, and everything gleamed a little too perfectly, stainless. Steel counters, chrome toaster, spotless sink. I used to love mornings. Now they just felt long. I pulled out the bread, 2 slices, the good kind with oats. I knew she liked apples with cinnamon, so I sliced them thin and laid them on the edge of the plate, fanning them out like petals. The toaster clicked softly behind me. I laid out 2 plates, just in case. I hummed a little under my breath, something familiar, maybe a hymn, maybe something I made up years ago. It echoed against the hard kitchen walls. The toast popped up, just golden. I buttered both pieces carefully, the way she used to like. Not too much, not too dry. I set it on the table and poured her coffee. Black, no sugar. Mine too, though I sometimes added a little milk when she wasn't looking. Footsteps padded down the hall. I turned, smiling. She came in with her phone tucked under her arm and a shaker bottle in hand. She didn't look at the table. "Morning," she muttered. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, soft as I could. She opened the fridge, pulled out almond milk, protein powder, and something green. She blended it quickly, loudly, drowning out the quiet hum of the house. "You're not hungry?" I asked gently. She barely glanced. "I'm good, thanks." Then she walked out again, sipping from the bottle as she answered a text. I stood there in my apron, the toast cooling beside me. The butter had melted unevenly. One corner had gone hard already. I sat down and ate slowly. It didn't taste the way it used to. The apples were sweet, but something about it still felt cold. I could still hear Harold's voice in my head every time I set up the ironing board. "Firm pressure, sweetheart. Let the heat do half the work." He liked his shirts crisp, collar folded sharp, sleeves smooth. I think it made him feel put together, even on the hard days. I used to iron for him every Sunday afternoon. 3 dress shirts, 2 pairs of slacks, and that one undershirt he insisted needed steaming too. Now I stood over my daughter's blouses. Pale blue, soft lilac, a silky black one that slipped through my hands like water. I pressed them carefully, folding the arms just so. I used linen spray, her favorite scent, and let the steam rise up and warm my face. She didn't ask me to do this, but I did it anyway. Maybe it was a habit. Maybe it was hope. The radio murmured quietly from the windowsill, some old song I didn't know. Outside, the sun shifted through clouds. I could hear a car pulling into a driveway next door. She passed by the door once. I smiled at her. "I pressed the black blouse for you. It had a wrinkle near the collar." She paused, glanced in, and gave a small nod. "Okay." Then she kept walking. I folded each one and stacked them neatly on the chair, smoothing the fabric, with my palm. They looked untouched, still perfect, still waiting. Sometimes I pretended she was just busy. Maybe later she'd say, "Thanks, Mom." Sometimes that was enough to keep me going. She used to sit on my lap, small enough to fold into my chest, humming nonsense songs and twisting my necklace between her fingers. The locket was old even then, silver, worn, with a clasp that always stuck. Inside, a picture of Harold on one side, her baby photo on the other. Tonight we sat in the same room, but oceans apart. She was curled into the couch with her laptop open, blue light reflecting on her face. Her eyes scanned the screen, fingers tapping. I smiled gently. "Do you remember when you used to play with this?" I held up the locket, letting it swing, just slightly. The chain caught the lamplight. She didn't look up. "That was 30 years ago." Her tone wasn't unkind, just distracted, dismissive. I let the chain fall back into my hand. I pressed the locket against my palm, feeling the ridges like braille. My fingers closed around it slowly. "Feels like yesterday to me," I whispered, but not loud enough for her to hear. The room smelled faintly like her shampoo, clean, bright, unfamiliar. I turned back toward my knitting, keeping my hands busy, and in my chest, the memory folded itself back into place, like a letter I wasn't meant to send again. That night I saw her again, my mother. Not as I remembered her on holidays or in photographs, but how she really was. Sitting by the window, sewing needle in hand, knuckles thick and stiff with years of work. Her shoulders curled forward, eyes squinting at the fabric, backlit by the orange glow of the hall light. I had walked past her 1,000 times and never thought to ask if she was tired. She never said. But I saw it now, the way her hands shook. When she re-threaded the needle, how her lips moved soundlessly, whispering to herself, or maybe to God. She never asked for help. Not once, and I, too young to see the ache, just assumed she didn't need it. That night, sitting in this unfamiliar bed, I felt the weight of her silence settle on my chest. I remembered how I used to lie in bed and hear the soft whir of the sewing machine down the hall. It was the sound of love wearing thin but never breaking. I wondered if she resented it, or if, like me, she just wanted to be seen while she was still whole. I should have asked, but maybe I already knew the answer. The hall lights glowed softly, not bright enough to see by, but just enough to remind me this wasn't my house. I moved quietly, folding towels she hadn't asked for, smoothing the corners like I always had. I placed them in the linen closet that didn't have labels and didn't have a scent I recognized. I passed the living room where she had left a light on and turned it off. She'd always forget. The kitchen faucet had a slow drip. I tightened it without thinking. I walked through the house like a song played for no one. Familiar steps, invisible footprints. I whispered goodnight as I passed her door. I don't think she heard, or maybe she did. Maybe it just didn't matter anymore. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, unsure whether I'd done too much or not enough. I helped build this life. The roots, the roof, the person in the next room, and now I lived inside it like a shadow, with warm hands and an open heart, still waiting to be seen. The sky hadn't stopped crying in 3 days. Not in heavy sobs or sharp thunder, just long, weary sighs, like the clouds were holding something they didn't know how to say. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. Rain tapped at the window beside me, slow and steady like a lullaby I'd forgotten the words to. I watched the drops chase each other down the glass, racing in crooked paths that ended nowhere. Some merged, some disappeared before they got there. My knees ached from sitting too long, but I didn't move. There was nowhere to go. The kitchen light buzzed quietly above me, dim and indifferent. The tile felt cold under my slippers. The air in the room carried the damp smell of rain and old coffee that never got poured out. Somewhere deep in the house, I could hear the faint hum of the dryer, a soft reminder that life was still moving, even if I wasn't. I missed the conversation, the kind that didn't feel like I was interrupting. I missed laughter that didn't belong to another room. I missed my own home, where even silence had company. I sipped the tea again, bitter now and cold. Outside, the world blurred behind rain-streaked glass. I let my thoughts follow the patterns, tracing the trails with my eyes like maybe I could catch one and ride it somewhere warm. Somewhere that didn't feel like waiting. It was strange how even the sky seemed to understand. She came in mid-laugh, phone pressed to her ear, fingers brushing hair behind her ear like she was still 20. Her voice filled the kitchen, bright, bubbly, the kind of laughter that bounced off walls, but not toward me. I sat at the end of the counter, tea in hand, watching the steam curl and vanish. The warmth from the mug didn't reach my fingers anymore. She leaned against the fridge, still laughing, something about work or someone named Claire. Her eyes never found mine. Not once. I didn't speak. I didn't want to make her choose between me and the voice on the other end of the call. I knew which one she'd pick. I just sat still, trying to make myself small enough to not be in the way. The toast in the oven had burned. I could smell it, bitter and sharp in the corners of the room. She didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't say. She opened a cabinet, pulled out a snack, and kept talking. I watched her the way someone watches a stranger who looks familiar, like I'd known her once but couldn't place the face anymore. The tea cooled. The smile she gave her phone stayed where I couldn't reach it. I wondered quietly when I stopped being someone she saw and became something she stepped around. I stood slowly, knees stiff, chair legs groaning across the tile with a loud scrape. It was accidental, just the sound of old wood against the old floor, but it tore through the quiet like a scream. She winced, not startled, just annoyed. "Can you not do that?" she said, barely glancing up from her screen. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was casual, like I'd dropped a spoon or left the tap running. I opened my mouth, closed it again. The chair sat behind me, empty and crooked now. I looked at it like it had betrayed me. "I didn't mean to," I whispered. She didn't answer, already moved on to something else. The flickering kitchen light buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows on the counter. The smell of dish soap lingered, but beneath it was something sour. Burnt toast, maybe, or just the weight of something unspoken. Stood there, unsure whether to leave the room or sit back down. At that moment, I wasn't her mother. It was a sound she wished she didn't hear, a creaking door, a dragging chair, a noise. I turned slowly, placed the mug in the sink, and rinsed it with hands that suddenly felt too visible. The stairs creaked softly beneath my feet, not in protest, but like they were remembering me. I moved slowly, past her room, past the hallway mirror I avoided, to the spare bedroom where I'd stored what was left of us. The cedar chest sat near the window, its surface dusty, corners worn smooth by time. I knelt beside it, my fingers resting on the lid. The scent of old wood and something faintly sweet, lavender maybe, drifted up as I opened it. The hinges sighed, not loudly, just enough to feel familiar. Inside, everything was still exactly as I'd left it. Paper hearts with uneven edges, drawings with lopsided trees and stick figure hugs. A crayon note that read, "You are the bestest mommy," in big, determined letters. I reached for one of the folded cards, its edges curled from years of being held. Her handwriting had always been bold. She used to bring them to me after school, holding them out like treasure, and they were. I held them now like they still had heat, like maybe if I pressed them to my chest, they'd pulse again. There were photos tucked between envelopes, one of her with Harold, her feet on his shoes dancing in the living room. One of the three of us on the porch, sun in our eyes. I sat, on the floor, surrounded by paper and time, and I let myself unravel just a little. She used to sit on my lap, small enough to fold into my chest, humming nonsense songs and twisting my necklace between her fingers. The locket was old even then, silver, worn, with a clasp that always stuck. Inside, a picture of Harold on one side, her baby photo on the other. Tonight we sat in the same room, but oceans apart. She was curled into the couch with her laptop open, blue light reflecting on her face. Her eyes scanned the screen, fingers tapping. I smiled gently. "Do you remember when you used to play with this?" I held up the locket, letting it swing. Just slightly. The chain caught the lamplight. She didn't look up. That was 30 years ago. Her tone wasn't unkind, just distracted, dismissive. I let the chain fall back into my hand. I pressed the locket against my palm, feeling the ridges like braille. My fingers closed around it slowly. "Feels like yesterday to me," I whispered, but not loud enough for her to hear. The room smelled faintly like her shampoo, clean, bright, unfamiliar. I turned back toward my knitting, keeping my hands busy, and in my chest the memory folded itself back into place, like a letter I wasn't meant to send again. That night, I saw her again, my mother. Not as I remembered her on holidays or in photographs, but how she really was. Sitting by the window, sewing needle in hand, knuckles thick and stiff with years of work. Her shoulders curled forward, eyes squinting at the fabric, backlit by the orange glow of the hall light. I had walked past her 1,000 times and never thought to ask if she was tired. She never said. But I saw it now, the way her hands shook. When she rethreaded the needle, how her lips moved soundlessly, whispering to herself, or maybe to God. She never asked for help. Not once. And I, too young to see the ache, just assumed she didn't need it. That night, sitting in this unfamiliar bed, I felt the weight of her silence settle on my chest. I remembered how I used to lie in bed and hear the soft whir of the sewing machine down the hall. It was the sound of love wearing thin, but never breaking. I wondered if she resented it, or if, like me, she just wanted to be seen while she was still whole. I should have asked, but maybe I already knew the answer. The hall lights glowed softly, not bright enough to see by, but just enough to remind me this wasn't my house. I moved quietly, folding towels she hadn't asked for, smoothing the corners like I always had. I placed them in the linen closet that didn't have labels, and didn't have a scent I recognized. I passed the living room where she had left a light on and turned it off. She'd always forget. The kitchen faucet had a slow drip. I tightened it without thinking. I walked through the house like a song played, for no one. Familiar steps, invisible footprints. I whispered good night as I passed her door. I don't think she heard, or maybe she did. Maybe it just didn't matter anymore. I stood in the hallway a moment longer, unsure whether I'd done too much or not enough. I helped build this life. The roots, the roof, the person in the next room, and now I lived inside it like a shadow, with warm hands and an open heart, still waiting to be seen. The sky hadn't stopped crying in 3 days. Not in heavy sobs or sharp thunder, just long, weary sighs, like the clouds were holding something they didn't know how to say. I sat at the kitchen table with my hands wrapped around a lukewarm mug. Rain tapped at the window beside me, slow and steady, like a lullaby I'd forgotten the words to. I watched the drops chase each other down the glass, racing in crooked paths that ended nowhere. Some merged, some disappeared before they got there. My knees ached from sitting too long, but I didn't move. There was nowhere to go. The kitchen light buzzed quietly above me, dim and indifferent. The tile felt cold under my slippers. The air in the room carried the damp smell of rain and old coffee that never got poured out. Somewhere deep in the house, I could hear the faint hum of the dryer, a soft reminder that life was still moving, even if I wasn't. I missed the conversation. The kind that didn't feel like I was interrupting. I missed laughter that didn't belong to another room. I missed my own home, where even silence had company. I sipped the tea again, bitter now and cold. Outside, the world blurred behind rain-streaked glass. I let my thoughts follow the patterns, tracing the trails with my eyes like maybe I could. Catch one and ride it somewhere warm, somewhere that didn't feel like waiting. It was strange, how even the sky seemed to understand. She came in mid-laugh, phone pressed to her ear, fingers brushing hair behind her ear like she was still 20. Her voice filled the kitchen, bright, bubbly, the kind of laughter that bounced off walls, but not toward me. I sat at the end of the counter, tea in hand, watching the steam curl and vanish. The warmth from the mug didn't reach my fingers anymore. She leaned against the fridge, still laughing, something about work or someone named Claire. Her eyes never found mine. Not once. I didn't speak. I didn't want to make her choose between me and the voice on the other end of the call. I knew which one she'd pick. I just sat still, trying to make myself small enough to not be in the way. The toast in the oven had burned. I could smell it, bitter and sharp in the corners of the room. She didn't notice, or if she did, she didn't say. She opened a cabinet, pulled out a snack, and kept talking. I watched her the way someone watches a stranger who looks familiar, like I'd known her once but couldn't place the face anymore. The tea cooled. The smile she gave her phone stayed where I couldn't reach it. I wondered quietly when I stopped being someone she saw and became something she stepped around. I stood slowly, knees stiff, chair legs groaning across the tile with a loud scrape. It was accidental, just the sound of old wood against the old floor, but it tore through the quiet like a scream. She winced. Not startled, just annoyed. "Can you not do that?" she said, barely glancing up from her screen. Her tone wasn't harsh. It was casual, like I'd dropped a spoon or left the tap running. I opened my mouth, closed it again. The chair sat behind me, empty and crooked now. I looked at it like it had betrayed me. "I didn't mean to," I whispered. She didn't answer. Already moved on to something else. The flickering kitchen light buzzed overhead, casting uneven shadows on the counter. The smell of dish soap lingered, but beneath it was something sour. Burnt toast, maybe, or just the weight of something unspoken. Stood there, unsure whether to leave the room or sit back down. At that moment, I wasn't her mother. It was a sound she wished she didn't hear. A creaking door, a dragging chair, a noise. I turned slowly, placed the mug in the sink, and rinsed it with hands that suddenly felt too visible. The stairs creaked softly beneath my feet, not in protest, but like they were remembering me. I moved slowly, past her room, past the hallway mirror I avoided, to the spare bedroom where I'd stored what was left of us. The cedar chest sat near the window, its surface dusty, corners worn smooth by time. I knelt beside it, my fingers resting on the lid. The scent of old wood and something faintly sweet, lavender maybe, drifted up as I opened it. The hinges sighed, not loudly, just enough to feel familiar. Inside, everything was still exactly as I'd left it. Paper hearts with uneven edges, drawings with lopsided trees and stick figure hugs, a crayon note that read, "You are the bestest mommy," in big, determined letters. I reached for one of the folded cards, its edges curled from years of being held. Her handwriting had always been bold. She used to bring them to me after school, holding them out like treasure, and they were. I held them now like they still had heat. Like maybe if I pressed them to my chest, they'd pulse again. There were photos tucked between envelopes, one of her with Harold, her feet on his shoes, dancing in the living room. One of the three of us on the porch, sun in our eyes. I sat on the floor, surrounded by paper and time, and I let myself unravel, just a little. I pulled out the one with the red crayon across the front. Crooked hearts, misspelled words. "To Mommy, I love you more than ice cream." The paper was soft at the folds, the way old things get when they've been touched too much. I ran my fingers over the letters. They'd faded, but not enough to forget who wrote them. I remember the day she gave it to me. Sticky hands, proud grin, eyes wide like she'd just handed me the moon. She meant it. Back then, love was simple, sweet, easy to say out loud. Now, even small kindnesses came quiet, if at all. I held the card to my chest, not crying, just letting the weight of it settle there. I wondered if it still remembered the little hands that made it. I didn't fold it in anger, just gently, like I was tucking away something too delicate to leave in the open. A part of me folded too. Not gone, just put away. I cried in silence, the way older women do. Not with sobs, not with sound. Just a quiet release from somewhere deeper than tears normally reach. I sat in the corner chair, the lamp dim behind me. The window hummed with soft rain, drops ticking steadily like a slow clock. I didn't wipe my face. I didn't hide. My chest ached, not from heartbreak exactly, but from the weight of being unseen for so long. I pressed my hand to my heart, not because it hurt, but because I needed to feel it still beat. I had given everything, years, sleep, meals, money, laughter, and now I sat in this house like a book no one opened anymore. And still, I turned the pages inside me. Because that's what we do. We keep reading ourselves back into the story, even when no one else does. My tears slowed, not because I was done, but because I had remembered who I was, a woman still soft, still real, still here. The sunlight came in just right that morning, casting soft gold stripes across the carpet like a welcome mat. I stood in the doorway, holding my breath, watching him sit cross-legged on the floor. Harold's old chessboard lay open in front of him. I hadn't seen it in years. Worn at the corners, 2 pawns missing their bottoms. But the pieces still stood like they remembered where they belonged. He turned one between his fingers, brow furrowed in concentration. I hadn't touched that board since before she moved it to storage. And now here it was, set up and waiting, like memory had been patient all along. The scent of toast wafted in from the kitchen, mingling with old wood and something warmer than the room had felt in weeks. Funny, I thought. How something as simple as a wooden board could call me back into myself, and how easily a child could pull it out again, like it had always been his to hold. He looked up at me, chin resting on his hands. "Grandma," he asked, "who taught you chess?" That question, so small, so casual, moved something deep in me. My breath caught, then eased. "Your grandfather," I said, slowly lowering myself into the chair beside him. "He used to let me win, until I didn't need him to." He laughed, light and full, the kind of laugh that opens a window in your chest. "Will you teach me?" he asked. I smiled, soft and sure, like I'd remembered something I hadn't even known I'd lost. I picked up a knight, felt its smoothness in my fingers. "Of course," I said. It had been so long since anyone wanted my stories, since anyone had asked. The house was quiet, except for the clink of dishes being put away in the kitchen. The sun touched the floor in little patches, warming the edge of the board. I looked at him, and for the first time in days, I felt seen. My knees complained, of course, they always did. But I lowered myself to the floor beside him, slow and careful, using the arm of the chair for balance. The carpet was soft but not forgiving. Still, I would have knelt on gravel if it meant feeling this kind of closeness again. He watched me set up the pawns, eyes wide and patient. "This one always moves first," I said, tapping gently. "But it's not the strongest piece. It's just the one brave enough to go." He nodded, absorbing it like truth. As we played, I told him about Harold's patience, about late nights with tea and games that lasted hours. He listened without looking away, the way only a child can. Like nothing else in the world mattered, and for a while, nothing else did. Not the past, not the silence, not even the ache in my legs. Only this, the sound of a bishop sliding across, wood, and a little boy who wanted to know more. He moved his rook too far, and I smiled. "You know," I said, shifting my queen, "Harold once painted the shed in the middle of a rainstorm." He blinked up at me. "Really?" "Mm-hmm." I chuckled. Had Sinatra blaring from the radio. Said the paint would hold better if the wood was dancing. He laughed, a quick, surprised laugh. "We used to dance in the kitchen, too. No music. Just us, swaying and humming and stepping on each other's toes." "Did you spin?" he asked. "Oh, yes," I said, twirling the rook slowly in my fingers. He always spun me, even when the soup was boiling. He grinned, and I saw it then, Harold's spark in his smile, the same mischief, the same joy. At that moment, we weren't just playing a game. We were 3 people, sharing one memory, and somehow I was dancing again. I glanced at the shelf as he packed up the board. The check was still there, folded neatly, untouched. For days I'd stared at it like proof, like maybe if she cashed it, it meant I still counted. That I was more than old furniture in a clean house. But now, watching him close the chessboard, I didn't feel small. He reached for my hand without asking. Just held it a second. I wasn't a burden to him. I was history. A whole person. A story. Let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The house still hummed. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed. And I sat there, hand in his, knowing I didn't need that check to mean something. I already did. The light through the curtains had that golden kind of tiredness to it, stretching long across the carpet, touching everything softly but saying nothing. I stood for a moment in the middle of the room, hands clasped, trying to find the right words. "Will you sit with me?" I asked. She looked up from her phone, eyes unsure, then slowly walked over to the couch, her arms crossed, her phone turned, screen down on the side table, but not off. She sat like someone ready to leave, chin high, breath short. I sat across from her, my back stiff, my palms damp. We didn't speak for a moment, just sat in the hush of a room we both used to fill with noise. Dinner clatter, bedtime songs, cartoons, arguing about curfews. Now there was only this quiet and the click of the ice maker in the kitchen. I studied her face. Older now, tired in a way I recognized. There was so much between us, and none of it said yet, but I wasn't here to fight. I was here to be seen. "I know I'm not convenient," I said, my voice softer than I'd expected. "But I am not invisible." She blinked. A flicker, something between surprise and something older, maybe recognition. I looked at her fully then, and I let my hands rest on my lap, open. "These hands," I whispered. "You know what they've done." They were shaking a little, but I kept them steady. "They've wiped your tears. Hold your forehead through fevers, sewn your costumes, your dresses, even your doll blankets." She looked at my hands then. Just for a second. I didn't cry. I wasn't angry. But the air shifted, like something in the room had finally sat down. With us. "I'm still here," I said. "You just stopped seeing me." The ticking clock behind her suddenly felt loud. Not in an annoying way, but in a way that reminded me how much time had passed since she'd asked about my day. She didn't say anything back, but she didn't look away either. And for now, that was enough. I looked down at my hands again and took a long, deep breath. Then I pointed toward the check, still sitting untouched near her coffee mug. That was supposed to help," I said. "I didn't write it because I had to. I wrote it because I remembered what it meant to show up for someone, even when it hurts." She didn't move. She didn't blink, but I kept going. These hands, these tired, spotted hands, worked factory floors, chopped vegetables after double shifts, counted coins in the middle of the night so you could go on that field trip. I smiled, a little bitterly. "And when college came, I gave you my ring, the one Harold gave me. You never asked for it, but I knew, and I gave it anyway." I looked up at her again. Her eyes had lowered. "That check isn't guilt," I said softly. "It's a memory of what I gave up for you, what I still would." She didn't argue, and I didn't need her to. "I'm not asking for a parade," I said, "or even for a thank you." She was quiet. Her eyes didn't meet mine, just traced the edge of the coffee table like the grain in the wood might say something instead. I just wanted to matter again. It came out softer than I'd meant, and somehow heavier too. There was a pause. One of those long, breathless spaces that stretch forever. I watched it land in her, the realization, the weight of it. Her shoulders dipped slightly, like something inside her finally gave way. Still, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. The silence finally had truth in it, and I could feel the room start to remember us again. I stood, slow and steady, and walked to the shelf where the check sat untouched. The corners were still crisp. It hadn't moved in days. I picked it up. She looked up from her seat, her brow furrowed. Then I tore it, clean down the middle. Her gasp was soft but sharp. It filled the room like thunder that didn't need lightning. "I didn't write this to be paid," I said, voice calm. "I wrote it because I thought it would remind you of what we used to mean." I set the torn halves on the table, side by side. This was never about money. I met her eyes. This was about love. For a moment everything stopped. The humming fridge, the creaking vent, even her breathing. And then it started again, but lighter. I walked back to my chair, and for the first time in a long time, I felt taller than I had when I stood. She looked at me then, really looked. I took a breath and nodded. "I'll stay," I said. Her shoulders straightened, but she didn't speak. "Not because I owe you," I added, "but because your son deserves to know who I am." I folded my hands gently. "And maybe, if we're lucky, you'll remember who you used to be too." Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. Instead, her eyes softened. Something cracked. Something old shifted quietly inside her. I didn't try to fix it. I left the pieces where they fell, because love doesn't always glue things back together right away. Sometimes it just sets them down gently and waits. The silence didn't leave, but it softened. No more slammed cabinet doors. No more unspoken sighs, heavy enough to fill a room. The quiet became something gentler. Something that waited instead of weighed. She started leaving me notes. Not sentimental things. Nothing you'd frame. Just small, practical ones. Dinner at 7. He wants another chess lesson. Don't forget your tea in the microwave. I'd find them stuck to the fridge or tucked beside the sugar jar. Some scribbled in a rush, others written carefully like she didn't want me to miss a word. I kept them all. Sometimes I'd touch the edge of the paper, run my thumb across the curl of her handwriting. Like maybe that ink held something more than reminders. Maybe it held trying, reaching, and that was enough. Spring crept in through the window, scenting the kitchen with fresh air and blooming grass. Toast popped up just as it always had. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was eating alone, even when I was. I stitched the new quilt slowly, deliberately. No names this time. No initials embroidered into the corners. Just soft blue cotton and the kind of green that reminded me of her favorite sweater from years ago. It felt odd not to leave my mark. I always had before. Her childhood blankets were full of stitched hearts and tiny stars. My way of saying, "I'm here," without saying it aloud. But this time, this one didn't need a label. Maybe love doesn't always need to announce itself. I folded the quilt neatly and laid it across the guest bed. The fabric still smelled faintly of clean linen and dryer sheets. The afternoon light spilled through the window, brushing gold over the edges. I stood there a moment, smoothing the blanket one last time, hoping that what I hadn't said out loud had somehow sewn itself into the seams. She didn't always stay for long, but sometimes she'd sit on the arm of the couch while I played chess with her son. She didn't scroll her phone. She didn't hush me when I spoke. And once, just once, she asked something soft. "What was Dad like when he was younger?" I looked up. Her voice had that careful tone, like the question might break if you pushed too hard. "He was funny," I said. "The kind of funny that didn't need to be loud. He used to hum while painting. Off-key. Terrible." She smiled, and for the rest of the game, she stayed. The pieces clicked gently on the board. The tea cooled beside us, and something old and important passed between us. Not answers, maybe, but presence. That was more than I thought I'd have. She didn't say anything that morning. Just walked into the kitchen, still in her robe, and placed a mug beside my hand. Chamomile, still steaming. She didn't make eye contact at first. But as she turned to leave, her eyes met mine, soft, searching, like she was giving something back. It reminded me of when she was little, and she'd hand me a dandelion with sticky fingers and a serious expression, as if she'd just gifted me a jewel. This tea felt the same. I didn't need a speech, just that mug, that look, and her quiet staying. That night, just before she turned in, she paused in the doorway. "I think I forgot how much you did," she whispered. "I'm sorry." She didn't wait for a reply. I didn't offer one. I just reached over and placed my hand on hers. Felt the moment she let it soften under mine. We sat like that, hands resting, hearts catching up, without needing anything more. Some love returns without ceremony, just warmth. Later that night, I found myself staring at the shelf again. The check was gone, not because she'd cashed it, but because it didn't need to be there anymore. I finally understood. Love doesn't ask for receipts. It asks to be witnessed. And in that quiet, long-awaited glance from her across the kitchen table, I was. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just tolerated, I was seen. I was still hers. Thank you, truly, for sitting with me all this way. If you're 50 or older, tell me your age and where you're listening from. I love seeing how far a story can travel. And if something in this stirred a memory, I hope you'll share it in the comments. I'm here, and I'm listening. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more of Grandma's stories. And remember, being seen, being loved, you've never stopped deserving that.